So hereditary breast cancers are not very common. Out of 100 breast cancer patients, we would expect 2 to 3 to have hereditary breast cancer. That means a breast cancer that happened because of genetic default or genetic problem or mutation. So generally, it's not common. It can be more common in some geographical, like demographical groups, or in certain areas or in the families where already have like a lot of genetic issues and problems. But generally speaking, it's about 2 to 3% of all breast cancers are genetically related. There are a number of genes that are known to potentially increase the risk of having breast cancer. The most common ones are the BRCA1, BRCA2, and then there's the BALB2. But also there are other genes, altogether about 9 genes that can actually increase the chance of having breast cancer. Most of the genetic testing kits, they will test for these 9 genes, but specifically for BRCA1, BRCA2, and the BALB2. So the aim of the breast genetic testing is to identify whether the patient, the lady or the gentleman, carries the genetic mutation that makes them at higher risk of having breast cancer in the future. Some genetic disorders or genetic problems, such as the BRCA1 and BRCA2, can also carry a risk in having ovarian cancer. So it's not just preventing breast cancer, but also ovarian cancer. Some of these genetic tests are done for patients who are already being diagnosed with a breast cancer because of their family history or because of the type of the cancer they carry. But others are tested because of their family history and they don't have any breast cancer diagnosed at the time of the testing. So different groups of patients, different aim from the genetic testing. Effectively, all patients can have breast genetic tests privately. However, in the NHS, it's different. The aim of having the gene testing is actually to identify those with a high risk of developing breast cancer. That will depend on the number of relatives that they have with the breast cancer or ovarian cancer and how close these relatives to them. So in most of the breast units, there is a family history clinic or service where the patient can be asked about all the relatives with the breast and ovarian cancers and other cancers, of course, and their relatives and what generation and how far these relatives are to the patient, and then assess their risk. If the risk is quite high, then a breast genetic testing can be offered. Also, a breast genetic testing is offered to patients, young patients who are diagnosed with a breast cancer. So certain breast cancers, such as like the triple negative breast cancer in patients younger than 60, is also an indication to having a genetic breast cancer. There are 3 common scenarios for breast genetic test results. The first one is to have a negative result. The second scenario is to have a pathogenic variant, which means a positive result for one of the gene mutations, which means that the patient has a higher risk of having breast cancer, which can be discussed with the patient, of course. And also relatives of this patient, it depends on how far they are in relation, they might have a higher risk of having breast or ovarian cancer in the future. The third scenario is identifying a variant which doesn't really have a clear significance at the moment. So what we call it a VUS, or variants of unknown significance. And that means these changes are not known yet whether they can actually be linked to having breast cancer or not. And only time will tell us whether these will turn into a pathogenic variations that need to be actioned, or actually are non-pathogenic variants. And it's very important to understand this, and very important to discuss this at the time of consultation with the patient, the genetic counseling. because dealing with unknown might be sometimes an issue, and the patient needs to be prepared to, if this is the result of their gene testing.